Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
In 2 days' time, voters in Ireland will go to the polls to decide whether to overturn the country's strict ban on abortion. Currently, terminations are only allowed if there's a substantial risk to the life of the mother. Each year, thousands of Irish women travel to the UK to access abortions in Britain. Emma Vardy has been meeting those on both sides of the debate.
The idea of ending the natural process of pregnancy before its time was just not something that I could comprehend doing.
This is one of Ireland's most contentious issues. Here, women make choices in the face of a deep moral divide.
I knew I could not continue with a pregnancy for another 19 weeks and watch this baby and feel this baby grow stronger.
Laura was told at 22 weeks that her unborn baby would not survive after birth.
The next step for us and the choice that we made was to travel. Mentally, we just made the decision, okay, this is going to happen. Our baby is going to die one way or another, regardless. We can't change that fact and we can't fix that fact. It was either prolong the agony and wait the 40 weeks and go through all of that, or decide to terminate, but now we can draw a line in the sand and hopefully move on from it.
She flew to a hospital in Liverpool for a procedure that would have been illegal at home. In Ireland, the 8th Amendment of the country's constitution gives an equal right to life for both mother and baby, and Cléine is fighting to keep it that way.
He lived for 17 minutes, and for all his 17 minutes he was held.
Ireland's protection of the unborn, Cléine says, gave her strength to continue a pregnancy, knowing her baby had a condition he couldn't survive.
And he was told how loved he was. It was an incredibly rewarding experience.
Why do you believe it would be wrong to offer women at least the choice?
It's a choice about ending the life, not just potentially harming, but deliberately ending the life of another. And I don't think that's ever the right solution.
Morning, everyone.
More than 3,000 women from Ireland travel abroad and pay privately for abortions every year. Many come here to Liverpool, where Dr. Rachel Foggan treats Irish women each day.
Quite often they might be alone, they may not have told anybody, they may have had to arrange childcare and time off work in secret.
Why do you yourself believe that women should have access to abortions?
I just think for so many different reasons, women find themselves in a situation, either it's an abnormal pregnancy, it's just not the right time, it should be talked about, it's a normal, part of healthcare.
Back in Ireland, campaigners have toured the country to get their message across. This referendum stirs strong emotions on both sides.
You are absolute disgrace to yourselves. This amendment would change. Why would I want your
because
trust?
It shows that it's actually true.
You're full of it. You're all full of it. And you women should be utterly ashamed of yourselves.
We try and explain this as logically as possible, that it's never okay to end the life of any innocent human being. If we're to build a humane society, we need to respect the right to life.
And this vote is about what kind of society Ireland wants to be. The declining influence of the Catholic Church means social attitudes are changing. In 2015, Ireland voted by a large majority to legalise same-sex marriage. But in this referendum, both sides believe the vote could be much tighter. On Friday, voters will decide whether Ireland should offer women a new choice. Access to abortion, a deeply private issue, now rests on the outcome of a very public debate. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Dublin.
Welcome to the Royal Kilmainham Hospital in Dublin. For all of this country's history, abortion has been illegal. As other countries liberalised their abortion laws, in 1983 here, the Constitution was amended to give equal rights to life for the unborn alongside pregnant women. In practice, that has made abortion in almost any circumstance illegal. This week, Irish voters will be asked whether they want to turn the page on that history, to repeal the 8th Amendment and pave the way for legal abortion for the first time in this republic. We're here with politicians, campaigners and doctors from both sides, as well as those for whom this is a very personal debate, those whose lives have been shaped by Ireland's abortion laws for good or for ill. Up and down the country, it's been a passionate and fiercely fought campaign which strikes at the heart of what many think the nation of Ireland is and what they hope it could be.
Whether we vote yes or no, Irish women will still be having abortions, and I think it's better that they have them here.
You see, it's a baby. This is what they're fine with killing.
It's not an issue to be discussed outside church.
We'll be back for a full discussion of the issues facing Ireland in a moment, but for now it's over to Jon Snow in London for today's other news. Yes, welcome back to the Royal Hospital Kilmainham in Ireland. We're here to hear from both sides of this difficult debate ahead of the referendum on Friday on abortion, as well as those who've lived through this argument. On Friday, voters will be asked to repeal the part of the Constitution which bans abortion. After that, the government proposes to legalise abortion up to the 12th week of pregnancy, and after that in cases where the health or life of the mother is at risk. But first, we've been following the campaign. Ireland is a country which has changed. Of that, there is no doubt. Once dominated by the Catholic Church, Ireland was the first country in the world to vote in favour of same-sex marriage in a referendum. The Irish people have voted to legalise divorce. Now they face calls for change again on one of the country's most difficult and divisive issues.
When women should have the right to make a decision. There is a chance.
Oh, I'm pretty low. Your campaign's pretty low. You see, it's a baby. This is what they're fine with killing.
It's not an issue to be discussed outside church.
On Friday, voters must decide whether to repeal the 8th Amendment. It enshrines in law the equal right of the mother and the unborn baby, effectively giving Ireland one of Europe's most restrictive abortion laws. Repeal campaigners say in reality it means the unborn child takes precedence over the rights of the mother. An argument now being played out in cities and villages across the country. In Kilkenny, while we're filming, a father whose baby son was given just 24 hours to live makes his very personal case.
What's your opinion then? This is a living example of why we should vote no. This is a living example.
Yeah, that's your experience of the 8th Amendment. Yeah. Other people have a different experience.
My wife recovered from leukemia and she went on to do her degree and she's now practicing it. She was going to die, he was going to die. We stuck it out.
You know what,
yes, but we must stick it out to the last second.
So every woman who has that situation will die?
No.
No.
We need choice. Women are adults and they can make their own decision as to what they can do with their own body. Your wife made a decision as to what was best in her situation. Other women should have the right to make a decision.
There is a chance.
The campaign has divided practically every group in Irish society.
35 years have passed since the Irish public voted the 8th Amendment into the Constitution. It was a bitterly fought battle then. Today is no different, although some things have changed along the way. Savita Halapanova's death in 2012 in Galway attracted global attention. She'd gone into hospital miscarrying at 17 weeks. Her request for a termination was refused because even though the pregnancy was no longer viable, there was still a fetal heartbeat. She contracted sepsis and died. Her case reignited the abortion debate, paving the way for this week's referendum. The Save the Eighth group have led a large organised grassroots campaign here on the streets of Swords, just outside Dublin.
I'm already voting no.
All right, cheers, thank you.
22-year-old art student Shevin has been with the campaign for 3 years.
We don't want to see what has been put forward in the proposal. Like, a lot of people aren't willing to, the people on the opposite side aren't willing to discuss, they aren't willing to have the proper conversations because it's difficult what they believe in. They don't want to answer the tough questions because the truth is it's not a nice thing. Abortion is not a nice thing, and we don't want it here.
Back in Kilkenny after Mass on Sunday, one thing is clear. Very little can be assumed about Ireland anymore.
I think people have the right, and they did in Portugal, they did in Spain, they didn't increase abortion, so I can't see any reason why we can't do the same in Ireland.
Whether we vote yes or no, Irish women will still be having abortions, and I think it's better that they have them here.
I feel that I'll vote no is my respect for human life.
I am probably going to be voting yes, yeah, because I suppose I believe that ultimately people need to be able to make the choice themselves as to what they want to do.
However people vote in the end, it's clear for some this has been a difficult time.
I wish it was over.
Well, now we're here to debate all the issues of this referendum, but I want to start with some of the women perhaps most profoundly affected. Arlette Lyons, tell me a little bit about your story.
Yeah, so basically 6 years ago, myself and my husband Alan, we were expecting our third baby. We'd had 2 boys, Cian and Evan, they were 8 and 5, and we really wanted to have a third baby to add to our family. And at my 12-week scan, I went alone because it was my third scan and it was, you know, nothing to see here, so my husband didn't come with me and I went on my own, and instantly the midwife who was giving me the scan noticed that there was something very wrong with my baby. So she asked me to call my husband and he arrived in, and we then went into the obstetrician and into the fetal, she was a fetal expert on these kind of conditions, and we were basically told that our baby was incompatible with life and that she had no chance of living.
What was that moment like?
It was absolutely horrendous, the worst moment ever. I kept on thinking, you know, no, there's something we can do. You know, we can go to America, we can have like maybe laser treatment, or kind of coming up with all different options of what we could do maybe to save her. And the obstetrician just made it very, very clear that she had a fatal abnormality. I still kind of didn't believe it, so I opted to get a CVS, which gives you 100% diagnosis, and the diagnosis came back that my baby had Patau's syndrome.
And what were your options then as far as you saw it?
So I assumed, obviously, that I would be brought in for a D&C or an early delivery, and I was told no, there was absolutely nothing that could be done for me. I was told I needed to go through with the rest of the pregnancy, and Skye, we called her Skye, that she would probably die of a heart attack before I got to 20 weeks. And I just found this absolutely unbearable, and they said, after a while, they said, you can travel to the UK for a termination. And I was just in shock. I was 34, happily married, expecting my third child, didn't think abortion would ever affect my life until it did.
Very briefly, and sorry to ask you for that, but you did travel.
Yeah, myself, my husband and my mum and dad made that awful decision to travel over to the UK, but it was my only choice. It was my only option for me to do so.
Glena Johnson, you will recognise some aspects of that story, but you made a different decision. Tell me about why.
Well, my own story is that we had a little boy in 2006, and at our 22-week scan, he was diagnosed as having anencephaly, which again is a condition where there's very little chance of him surviving for long outside the womb. Most babies with anencephaly live for a short amount of time, but they can't survive for long. So, like Arlette, I suppose that moment when you're given that diagnosis, it's a little bit like a black hole opens up in front of you where you had pictured the life of your child, and it's just such a horrific thing to hear. For me, though, I think the human journey is such a complex one. There's so many aspects to who we are, you know, physiological, psychological, emotional. And I think for me, the fact that we had that space to allow that news to sink in, and for me to, you know, as a whole person maybe come to terms with what had happened. I think for me, I came therefore completely unexpectedly, what I couldn't have imagined, to a place of peace with that the child I did have, rather than the child I thought I was going to have. And so that completely changed the game for me. It's like the pregnancy.
So it was never in your mind, sorry to interrupt you, but never in your mind an option to go to the UK?
It was offered, yeah. We were offered that we could travel to the UK if I wanted to end the pregnancy, or that if we wanted to continue in this hospital, that they would care for myself and my baby, treating us both as valuable patients. Now that is actually, I think, what every woman wants to hear, that you and your baby matter. I suppose what went through my mind then was, okay, he's safe here now. The future is so unknown, but he's safe and he's here.
But you took that decision.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel that a woman like Arlette shouldn't be allowed to legally take a different decision?
Well, Arlette, I wish, you know, all the best to, and I have, you know, the only thing I can say to Arlette is that, you know, I know we've both been through difficult circumstances and we've made the best decisions we could at the time. It is more that women that I would, in future, that would find themselves in this situation, that I suppose I would want to give them hope. We're hearing a lot about there is no choice.
But there will be women in the future who want to make the same decision as Arlette. Or Jennifer, quickly.
Yes, we found out at 22 weeks that our daughter had no kidneys, and she had a very severe form of spina bifida, which was explained to us that she would die quite painfully. She was being crushed within me, so she was, you know, the chance for her to go to full term was very slim. But if she did, she would suffocate to death, and they would need the pain team to medicate her because she would be in such pain. Given our diagnosis, we felt the best thing for her and for us was to travel and induce our labour early. We brought her home. We brought her home on the boat, and we buried her, and we had a priest do a blessing and all the rest, all the dignified stuff that anyone gets when they die. And the reason I made my choice was because she was suffering. She really was, and I didn't want my daughter to suffer.
Thank you very much for that. Well, hopefully we'll be able to return to you. But Paddy Tabine, you're a TD in Sinn Féin. Your party is campaigning for yes. You're campaigning for no. Why should women who want to make that choice, why should it be illegal for them?
Yes, you're right. So the party is obviously campaigning for yes vote, but I have a different opinion from them. There's no doubt that I'm a parent, and I can't imagine the difficulty that a family will go through if they get that type of diagnosis. But the problem, I suppose, at the moment is the abortion debate that we're having here in Ireland at the moment is not an abortion debate that's designed for those few cases. It's actually an abortion debate which is actually designed to allow for abortion for any reason whatsoever. So it's not for medical reasons, it's for any reason.
We are where we are, in a sense, you could argue, because hard laws make for those hard cases. But the point of the Eighth Amendment, just for 1 second, is that there would be no leeway because people were terrified the floodgates would open. But how can you stand there and say, women who make these decisions, that's just a consequence of maintaining the amendment? For example, a teenager raped by her father, you think she should go to term, and that is an acceptable consequence?
I think that the teenagers who are raped in this country need all the support that they can get.
They should go to term. It's a question that I've not heard no campaign answer. Just in a second.
Rape is a horrendous catastrophe for anybody. But if someone was to say to you that you're going to lose your life, that would be a horrendous catastrophe as well. And right now the government is looking to legalise one of those catastrophes. And see, at the heart of this is an individual living human being. And human beings should have human rights, and they should be universal. And an abortion, when it comes down to it, is an operation that allows for one human being to end the life of another human being.
So
and that's going to be legal for any reason in this country if we vote for yes.
Catherine Noon, that is the hard question that I've yet to hear the yes side answer, that this is a living thing which will be destroyed, and the yes camp are not being honest about that.
Well, obviously this is a difficult topic for everybody to discuss, and I very much sympathise with both of the women for what they have been through. But I think that both cases highlight the nub of this issue, which is that a decision is best made by a woman and her doctor when they're in those circumstances. And what we're proposing here is that we introduce a safe legal and medical framework to deal with this issue, rather than a situation where women board planes in the morning, come home traumatised in the evening, and take abortion pills in the privacy of their own bedroom. That type of situation is unsatisfactory, and I cannot stand
the
over
No
the
campaign. Just as you struggle to say yes, a girl who is raped by her father should go to full term. There is an argument against the Yes campaign that they will not accept. If someone looks at a scan picture, if someone wants a baby at 12 weeks, they think that is my baby. There is no doubt about that. And repealing the law, making abortion legal, you have to accept that that is the destruction of a living thing.
There is no doubt that there is no joy in this, but the reality has to be faced up to. We cannot stand over the current situation. We make women go through unnecessarily difficult situations, and our laws are simply in need of reform. You know, that is the reality of the situation that we are in now in Ireland, and we are a progressive society, and I don't think that the vast majority of the population want to see this situation continue.
Tommy Banks from Sligo.
Yes, I think what's forgotten about here is the human right to life of one human being. What human being has a right to take the life of another? We got rid of the death penalty in 1964. Now we want to bring it back for the unborn. You know, it's outrageous, I think.
It's about a balance.
It's outrageous to think that they're not respecting the right to life of another human being. Each of us was a small, little, tiny, living human being at one stage in our lives, and I think our mothers and fathers respected. One point I found on the canvas was the fathers of these little, in the case of rape, the fathers of the baby who is conceived in rape is not getting enough of a sentence. They should be getting 40 years in prison. But there's no word about that.
Okay, but you are destroying, sorry Tommy, you are destroying one human life to preserve another, or for the rights of the other.
Well, first of all, let's clarify something. I mean, I think it's a bit of a myth that the Yes side don't acknowledge that a termination of pregnancy and abortion involves the destruction of developing life. I haven't heard anybody from the Yes side deny that simple fact. It's an obvious fact. I think the difficulty is, and the crux of the issue is, that those on the Yes side believe that life begins at the point of conception, and they believe that from the point of conception, that embryo, that fetus, has an equal right to life. Sorry, the people on the No side believe that developing life has an equal right to life to that of a born woman. Now, the Yes side don't accept that. I don't accept that. Amnesty International doesn't accept that. But more importantly, international human rights law is clear that that's simply not true. There is a balancing of rights issue that needs to be addressed. But if you seek to address a balancing of rights issues such as that in the Constitution, you always end up with really grave, serious harm being caused to women and girls, and that's the reality of the Eighth Amendment. It hasn't stopped abortions, it's caused extraordinary harm and trauma. It is essentially an issue of women's equality.
Maeve O'Hanlon, you're a woman.
Yes,
patently.
I'm a woman.
It's a question of equality.
Well, it's a question of equality for babies as well. I mean, a baby does have a right to life, but I think where Colm is wrong is that in international human rights law, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child states that the child, by reason of his physical and mental immaturity, needs special safeguards and care, including appropriate legal protection, before as well as after birth. And I think that's something all of us recognise, that children need more protection than adults, young children need more protection than older children, and children in the womb are the most vulnerable of all and deserve extra protection, and Ireland has signed up to that UN Convention.
It's an important point to respond to, because you've raised an issue of human rights law. You're quoting there from the preamble of the Convention, which has no legal effect. And as you'll be only too well aware, the Committee on the Rights of the Child has told Ireland that its abortion ban and the laws that flow from the Eighth Amendment gravely violate the human rights of girls.
Really sorry, I just want to bring in Fabiana Mazzoni. You had an abortion at 17, is that right? What would you say today, as a woman who has lived through this?
That abortion, the Eighth Amendment in Ireland, disproportionately affects people who are already vulnerable, and that is the reason why I decided to go public, because I was not one of those people. I was not someone living with disabilities. I was not living in poverty. I was not in an abusive or a violent relationship. I was not living with a physical or psychological illness. I was as lucky as I could have been, and it was still terrible. Receiving zero aftercare after an abortion is unacceptable. And since I've been public, a couple dozen women have come to me with their stories, and a reoccurring theme in those stories is what I think is really the worst part of the 8th Amendment, and it's that the time that should be spent deciding whether you want to have an abortion in Ireland, if you have an unplanned pregnancy, you're considering abortion, that time is suddenly moved to a frantic search online to look for money, to get time off work, to find childcare, to lie to everyone in your life. That time should be spent in careful consideration with your doctor and with your loved ones.
Casey Asker, as another young woman, I mean, what is your view of that? They are described as patients of nowhere. They're having to leave the country because they cannot get the treatment, the care they need here. Is that right?
Well, the Medical Council has guidelines that are very clear. A woman is entitled to aftercare after an abortion in Ireland. So I think that's important to state. But also,
if you're across the water or somewhere else, you may not get that aftercare straight away. The very act of travelling can seem to people from the outside as a pretty brutal thing to do to women.
What I think we really need to be focusing on here is what are the people, the Irish people, being asked to vote on. We're being asked to vote for abortion on demand in Ireland. We're being asked to vote for abortion on healthy mothers with healthy babies. We absolutely need better support for women in Ireland. We need to be talking about financial support, perinatal hospice care, adoption services. There are so many things we need to be addressing, but we do not need to import England's problem, where for every 4 children born, one is aborted.
Catherine McGuinness, can I come to you? You've been a Supreme Court judge. That is right, isn't it? That it is predicted that the number of abortions in Ireland would rise, and that is a factor.
It is a factor that the no side are talking about, but we have had this argument over and over again about every issue that has come up in this, that when it was first brought forward in 1983, we were told that if we looked after the rape incident, you know, saving the girl who was raped, that hundreds of girls would pretend that they were raped. Now we're being told, then later when we came to the Protection of Pregnancy Act in 2013, we were told, which dealt with the possibility of suicide, we were told, oh, you can't have that. There will be hundreds of girls pretending that they want to commit suicide. Now, Mr. Tobin over here voted against his party, against that act, but he and the no side are now kind of relying on that act and saying, which is of course the law that you will have if yes is passed.
And Catherine's quite right in relation to one thing.
You're a barrister.
I'm a barrister and I'm campaigning for a no vote. She's quite right in respect of one thing. There's been a shameful failure on the part of government for many years to give the right supports to women, but the answer to that is not the sort of extreme proposals that have been brought forward. And for those of your viewers that perhaps aren't as familiar with the system here in Ireland, we have a written constitution. It sets out the values that we seek to live by, and one of those values is that as far as practicable, the life of the unborn will be protected. That has 2 practical effects. The first effect is Ireland is one of the safest places in the world to have a child, precisely because the doctor sees 2 patients rather than 1. But the second effect is this, and it's where I take slight difference to your introduction. Where the life of the mother is subject to a serious risk, or the possibility of serious risk to her life, she can receive the treatment. What's being talked about in this is a very extreme proposal, which is more liberal than the proposal which was brought forward. It is, in a material respect, goes further than the law in England.
OK, let's ask that to Dr. Marion Dyer. This is an extreme proposal.
Absolutely untrue.
The Protection of Life During Pregnancy law says that there must be a real and substantial risk to the life of a pregnant woman in order for it to be legal for a doctor to intervene. The masters of all 3 Dublin maternity hospitals, they see the most complex medical problems in pregnancy, have all agreed that they want the Irish people to vote yes
and that's precisely,
may I finish? To remove.
Just let her finish for a moment, please.
Thank you. To remove the 8th Amendment from our Constitution. I have been practicing as a GP in Dublin for 25 years. I sit with people who are hurt and harmed by the Eighth Amendment. 3 weeks ago, a man sat in my consulting room and he wept as he talked about his wife, who had no option other than continue to become more visibly pregnant or travel to the UK in order to end her pregnancy, which had a fatal fetal abnormality diagnosis.
And that's precisely the dilemma.
That is not an adequate healthcare response to a woman or a couple in distress. I want to look after all of my patients.
And that's precisely the dilemma that's going to be before the Irish people on Friday. Will we as a society say that we are going to have a value in our constitution which respects the unborn child, or are we going to sweep that away and give the power to the government to introduce a very liberal regime?
And the legislation is 12 weeks.
And there's one thing that's very important for the viewers to understand, and that is it's not simply up until 12 weeks. It's up until 12 weeks for no stated reasons. It's up until viability, which is nearly 6 months for the same sort of grounds as in England and Wales. And it's up to birth in certain circumstances. Up to birth in certain circumstances.
I mean, this is not the UK, and what is proposed is not anything like what has been the situation in the UK. The reality is that what we're talking about in those circumstances, first and foremost, is much wanted babies. Once you get to that stage in a pregnancy, the majority of pregnancies are much wanted. And you have a situation where perhaps a woman is about to go blind because of diabetes. Or, no, sorry, excuse me. This is the reality of life. Sorry, we do not live in black and white.
Well, you see, the thing is, how are people of Ireland supposed to decide when there are two such opposing viewpoints and facts disputed on both sides? So you've had quite a long time. Just for a second, just let Catherine Noon finish, please.
What's being proposed here is a safe legal framework to deal with the situation. You know, this is not something, there is no joy in this. None of us, you know, I'm as pro-life as the next person. There is no joy in any of this, but we have to face up to the reality for Irish women on a daily basis. And couples
really briefly,
these type of decisions in harrowing
consultant obstetricians and gynecologists in this state are saying that they are really concerned with the scaremongering that the government is involved. Now, for example, with regards to what's just been said there, I've spoken to ophthalmologists and eye surgeons, and they said there is never a case where a woman loses her sight in this country because of diabetes.
Actually, I think it's accepted that it's scaremongering on both sides.
I have checked the figures, and in the last 8 years, no woman has received an abortion in Ireland or in Britain from Ireland on the grounds of health, threat to health, physical health.
Any serious health you
Not
wish.
one woman.
We will return in just a moment. We have to break away for just a moment, but we will be back with more debate after this short break. So much of this debate has been framed around the question of what sort of country Ireland wants to be and what kind of a country it is now. Would something fundamental be lost if the 8th was repealed, or would it crown the transformation? Well, I want to put a couple of points quickly, if I can, and I'm sorry to say that to you, but there's an issue. One of the big things is about disability. That is one of the big fears on behalf of those who want to save the 8th Amendment. Martin McBreen, can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Hello there, Jackie. It's actually this week, 4 years ago, the 19th of May, my wife's birthday. We told the family we were expecting our 5th child, and it was great excitement. And the next day we went to Cavan and looked on the scan, and we seen our new baby, and they are safe and secure in the womb and sucking his thumb, and everything looked great. But unfortunately, the obstetrician picked up something was wrong. And we were referred to Dublin the next day. And then things kind of got very dark, and we were told that our baby looked like the Michelin Man, and didn't understand how our baby survived as long as it did. And there was no hope our baby wasn't going to survive. And we were shocked with this news. Like, you know, the day before, we were looking at our baby sucking his thumb and perfectly healthy in our view. And we were told, listen, you know, our baby's not going to make 20 weeks. And they said to us, you know, we'd advise you to go to our sister hospital in the UK and get this all taken care of. And my wife said, you mean an abortion? And she said, no, we mean a medical management of your pregnancy. Now, we felt this was something we weren't ready for. Like the day before, we were looking at everything looking okay. We decided to not go ahead with that and see what nature would do. And the obstetrician said, why are you taking the hard road? She said, because this is not going to happen. And why is it tell our siblings that there isn't going to be a baby and we should pick a plot out in the cemetery and have to do that at the time? But they were wrong, and our baby Grace was born on the 12th of November in 2014, and she's perfectly healthy, like she has Down syndrome, but that wasn't the issue, and that was not the reason why she wasn't going to
Tracy,
survive.
I want to bring you in quickly. I mean, you'll recognise again some of that story,
Yeah.
but you're on the different side. Tell me why.
Yeah. At my anomaly scan, I found out that my baby had a congenital heart defect and a possible syndrome as well. We were told 90% chance of Down syndrome, but not ruling out any other syndromes. So I went through hell, as did my husband. We weighed up all of our, what would we do? I didn't just think about myself and how it would affect me. The big thing for me was how this would affect my family. I had my oldest son was 5 at the time. I had to think about what kind of a life I was going to be letting him in for. I had to weigh up all my decisions, and in the end I decided to continue with the pregnancy. It wasn't an easy decision. The rest of my pregnancy was torture, it was hell, but I decided to continue. My son had open heart surgery when he was 6 months old. He's doing really well, but I would never assume that the choice that I made should be a choice that any other woman and family should make.
I want to take 2 points really quickly. Samantha Long.
Jackie, I'm representing Ireland's dark past, and I'm asking the citizens of Ireland and your Irish viewers tonight to vote yes on Friday. I was born into the Magdalen laundry system, where my mother was incarcerated for 49 years of her 51-year life. She was impregnated twice, resulting in 3 daughters. I am one of twins. She had no human rights, just to go back to human rights. She had no freedom and no autonomy. After Friday, I want the women of Ireland to walk out into the sunshine, out of the dark, cold culture of Ireland that I was born, a dark, cold place full of shame and blame and secrets and lies. And I am asking your viewers in Ireland to vote yes, so that women can access the care that they feel they need at a time that they need it. And finally, I would like that we stop sending our citizens under the carpet and across the water. Please vote yes on Friday.
Amanda Gallagher, just on that point, there is an oddity, isn't there, about a country which refuses abortion to its own women, but is happy for them to go somewhere else.
Hypocrisy. Well, I would wish for no woman to have to go through an abortion. I think this is a terrible, extreme, awful option to offer any woman. I had a miscarriage at 14 weeks, and I held our little baby after the miscarriage, and she was tiny and beautiful, and she had her hand under her chin and smiling. And it's not just a scan I got to actually hold. And if the nation had seen what we saw, it would be an out-and-out no on Friday.
Really quickly, you haven't had a chance to speak.
On Friday, we are not going to be voting about history. We are going to be voting in, if we vote yes, we are going to be voting in a very extreme proposal. If anybody doesn't believe us, please read.
You don't believe that it's the 12-week limit?
It is.
Just let her finish really quickly for a second. Just very quickly.
The bill is extremely clear. It's spelt out in black and white that there will be no restrictions up to 12 weeks. This makes it more liberal than in the United Kingdom. I'm a doctor, and as a doctor, when I have a pregnant woman in front of me, I have 2 patients, and that is how we manage pregnant women in Ireland, and it works really, really well.
But it is about choice, is it?
No, we have.
Choice
in terms, the Yes campaign have talked about terrible outcomes for women in pregnancy and going blind, etc., etc. However, the reality is that Ireland has an excellent record in maternal health care. We have one of the best in the world.
Sorry.
Very, very quickly.
The 12-week point. What troubles me most is that we are aware that we have abortion in Ireland. It's just that we carry it out in England all week. Would you please keep quiet? We have abortion in Ireland. We have a huge hypocrisy being put forward about the 8th Amendment, that because we have the 8th Amendment, we have kind of pure holy Ireland, and this doesn't happen. So we have our women going like refugees to England.
Very briefly for now, thank you so much for joining us. That's all for now here on 4, but you can go on watching on our website, channel4news.com/news, where we will continue with this debate.
The final full day of weeks of campaigning that has bitterly divided the Republic of Ireland ended today. The issue a matter of life and, depending on your point of view, death. The Republic's referendum on whether to liberalise abortion takes place on Friday. When the campaigning started, the opinion poll suggested a change in the law was highly likely. Lately, though, those polls have looked a lot closer.
As campaigning draws to an end tonight, nowhere and no one can escape the pressure of this historic vote, a vote which will shape the future of Ireland. The latest polls suggest many remain undecided, that this referendum hangs in the balance, and today the Prime Minister, who supports reform, called for a high turnout to change history.
If you look back at the referendum in 1983, only 55% of people voted, and I do hope in this referendum we'll see more people taking part in this important exercise in democracy.
It's young women here who are on the emotional front line, fighting to repeal some of the strictest abortion laws in Europe.
She was capable of suffering, and I hope she wasn't.
Claire is one of those daring to speak out. Under current law, abortion is illegal here unless the mother's life is at risk. This meant Claire was forced to carry a child she knew would die in her womb. The trauma was immense.
I felt like in my darkest hour, when I really needed to be able to take control of the situation and direct it in a way that would be the best for me, for my daughter, for the rest of my family, I wasn't allowed to because of a law that equated me to my dying baby who was in my body.
Like a postcard for your window.
The Yes campaigners want change, arguing that as many as 3,000 women travel to the UK every year for a termination, and many others buy pills online.
Thank you so much for coming out.
But the No campaigners have significant support for no change. On every street, in every city, personal beliefs are turning into political arguments.
What's a country with no choice? It's a dictatorship.
The No vote reflects a deeply held conviction that life begins at conception.
Our government is proposing abortion on demand, unrestricted, for a child up until 12 weeks and up until 6 months on undefined mental health grounds. So this is an absolutely vital referendum that will determine Ireland's future.
The Catholic Church is supporting the No vote and says this is a watershed moment.
It's huge, it's massive, and it's split. It's split the country nearly down the middle. I think the landscape has changed because of the scandals and because of the cover-up of those scandals. And I think they have lost a bit of confidence, maybe even a lot of confidence, in our church.
There isn't a corner of this country that isn't thinking about Friday's vote. The referendum has split Ireland. Young versus old, rural versus urban, secular versus the church. Yes, the vote is about women's rights, but it's also about what sort of country Ireland wants to be. And not everywhere shares the same liberal values as Dublin. Away from the cities, there's respect for some of the old ways and old values.
Abortion is murder, isn't it?
And it's all changed from my day. But that's the way it's gone, and that's the way it has to be.
But I think the woman carrying the child should have the choice to make the decision.
With so much at stake, thousands are now on their way home from abroad to vote. After one of the most intense grassroots campaigns in Ireland's history, the very latest polls suggest it's just too close to call.
Penny Marshall is live in Dublin tonight. As you said, this is such an important vote. People are travelling home to Ireland for it, and one that really could change the country forever.
Yes, that's right, Nina. And this evening, we believe that as many as 40,000 expatriates may be returning to this country to try and get the yes vote over the line. It could come down to how many people come out on Friday. Men are being urged to vote, reminded that this isn't simply a women's issue, and 125,000 new voters have registered in the last month, suggesting again that the vote could come down to just how many people are moved to get involved. It's been moving in a sense to see how agonised this decision is here. This is the 6th vote on abortion since 1983. The government has said this, though, is the final one, the final countdown. It's the one that matters. It's down to the wire. The Yes campaign was ahead, but it is closing. I think that by Saturday afternoon, we will know which way Ireland decides.
Penny Marshall, thank you.
I've been